In examining the Holy and Great Council, the preparations, and probably once everything is said and done, the outcome, one has to remember that each church, each of the 14 recognized canonical autocephalous churches are like chess pieces. And each chess piece has a defined character. We know from previous examples how these chess pieces have moved, how they interact. And in order to fully understand what is happening and what outcomes are being sought as a result of this council taking place, we have to understand how some of these chess pieces behave. And I think one of the most important chess pieces, because it is the most influential one, is that of the Russian Orthodox Church. And I would like to say a few words about that. From the time that the Muscovite regime state started appointing its own Metropolitan of Moscow, to its acceptance as the Fifth Orthodox Patriarchate in 1589, and the development of the idea that Moscow is the third and final Rome, Moscow has had one goal on its agenda: to completely absorb and replace Constantinople, Second or New Rome, with its own ecclesiastical empire. Starting with the annexation of Crimea in the 18th century, to the Crimean War in the 19th century, to what was happening at the beginning of the 20th century, Moscow had one agenda: to conquer Constantinople and take control of the Holy Lands. The Crimean War was a result of this political agenda. France and Rome were concerned. France was recovering from the Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, and several other social upheavals, and was not able to muster a military force strong enough to counteract the Russian Empire. And they approached England. The British Army was not willing to take on all of the Russian Empire, but they engaged the Russians strategically to deflect their goals, to bog them down, to cause military expenditures, and eventually the Crimean War stopped Russia's ambitions vis-a-vis Constantinople and the Holy Lands for a few more decades. Then, during World War I, the French and the British secretly were laying plans what they would do with the Turkish Empire once the Turkish Empire is dismantled with the successful conclusion of the First World War. These plans were interrupted by Russia suddenly attacking Turkey from the east and taking control of a large part of land which was inhabited by Armenians. And thus they were able to insert themselves into this secret diplomatic process that was being arranged by French diplomat Georges-Picot and a British diplomat, Sykes, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Sazonov, achieved what Russia was seeking for several hundred years. Upon the successful completion of the First World War, Russia was supposed to receive the territories in eastern Turkey and Constantinople and the entire strait between the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. The plan was to engage in ethnic cleansing, to depopulate the entire area that Russia would control, resettle loyal Cossacks, and of course, something that wasn't that officially stated, to eliminate the Patriarch of Constantinople. Because in one territory, and this is using the canons in reverse against the Ecumenical Patriarch, because it would be one territory and you cannot have two top patriarchs on the same territory. You cannot have two ruling patriarchs in the same empire, the Russian Empire. So somebody would have to cede their position, and that somebody would have been the Ecumenical Patriarch. As we know, there was a revolution in Russia, and Russia stopped becoming a player in this secret document. As a matter of fact, the communist government under Lenin published and publicly announced that the imperial powers of France and England had engaged in such secret diplomacy. Of course, the French and the British denied that there was ever such a document signed. But there were other documents signed then at the end of the First World War. And Britain was the one that took possession of Constantinople. That is when the Turks fought their war of independence, and they expelled the Russians from the eastern territories. They expelled the British from the area and the city of Constantinople, and the rest is the kind of history that we know. But realizing the political situation at the beginning of the 21st century, and this being exactly 100 years after the secret document between the French and the British was signed, it is interesting to see that the Russian Orthodox Church is trying to exploit this holy and great council on Crete for its own purposes. The Russian delegation would have liked to have included all 350 bishops, because from a point of pure democracy, they could have outvoted any other delegates present at the conference, at the council. The Ecumenical Patriarch limited all churches to 24 delegates, with only one voting delegate. and all documents had to be approved in advance. So in other words, why even have this council? What purpose does it serve? The purpose that it serves is to show to the world that the Ecumenical Patriarch is like the Pope. He is the leader of Orthodox Christians. But as I said, when you remove the word Orthodox or Pan-Orthodox, even the Russian website uses the word Pan-Orthodox, Vse Pravoslavnaya. The Ecumenical Patriarch is pulling his punches. He's hedging his bets. He is basically stepping back from being that leader that he should be. And already we know that many churches, many people that are Orthodox are not being represented by these councils. The Ukrainians, the Belarusians, the Montenegrins, the Macedonians, the Old Calendar Greeks, and there are some Russian churches that are not part of this group. The Russian church is going to be exploiting the fact that the Bulgarians are not coming, that the Antiochians are probably not coming. There are rumors that the Georgians are going to not come. So the Ecumenical Patriarch, in my opinion, is in a no-win situation. If the Russians don't show up, then obviously all of his plans will be torpedoed. But if the Russians show up and they turn the tables on him and manage to achieve certain concessions, that again will prove that the Ecumenical Patriarch is not the world leader of Orthodoxy. And then hopefully what will be good for the Ukrainians is that we will be able to argue that his demands to control all of the diaspora and all of the lands in the New World, that there is no basis for that argument, because he may be historically the first among equals. He has certain privileges. He is supposed to receive his respect, but he cannot be the de facto and the de jure ruler of all of the Orthodox in the world.